Okay, day 72, still no Braverman. I'm going to say something now that everybody's going to find maybe a little shocking, but the question I'm going to ask today is the Clinton Foundation a CIA cutout? Again, on this investigation, I go where the facts lead me and where the patterns lead me, and I just find it hard to believe that Hillary could, by herself, do all this, basically. A CIA cutout, by the way, is, this is the classic where we're making, let's say, parking meters, and we're sending parking meters to Nicaragua as a cover for sending airplanes down there. And what we're really making is hollow nose cones so that you can put cocaine in the nose cones and fly it back to an airport in Arkansas. So, which is there's a movie coming out next year, or this year now, Mina. They might have changed the name, but Ron Howard was making the movie. So if she was involved in a CIA operation that far back, right around the time Gary Webb was doing the Dark Alliance series, talking about how the CIA was running drugs into West Coast airports, it's not too big of a stretch to think that her whole career has been a CIA kind of involvement, and she's just progressed up the chain, if you will. So again, the big question is, does Eric Braverman know that? So today I want to talk about, and that's why I always bring in NATO, and that's why I always bring in kind of the generals and the people on the Senate Armed Services Committee, as well as the folks on the Foreign Relations Committee, which is Neil Brown, and the whole KK&R connection, because there was a book done a long time ago. It's called The Power Elite. C. Wright Mills, I believe, wrote it. And basically he said it's those three things. It's the oil making the decisions, then the military brokers figuring out how to plan Petraeus's operational plans, how to take it, and then the CIA basically is setting up this is OTPOR, for instance, with NATO, setting up this group of dissidents. But within the group of dissidents, you have these guys, which are the warriors. So you have the warriors kind of get the dissidents to become violent. That's the whole secret of OTPOR. So each one of these things, and it's called a gladio. You basically cache the arms like they did in Syria all around. You bring up protests, civilian protests like the Muslim Brotherhood did in Libya. And then you do something violent to the crowd, maybe kill one or two of the protesters, and then the protesters return violence on the state. So that's the OTPOR MO. So if that's what they did in Libya, and if that's what they did in Syria, and that's what they did in Honduras, and that's what she's doing in Venezuela, maybe this question is that if the Clinton Foundation could be a cutout for the CIA. So I'm going to talk about that and kind of offer some ideas and proof along the way. We'll go to the next slide, which is, I mentioned gladios. You can down below see what a gladio operation is, and this is where Sibel Edmonds has done a lot of work on gladios. But here's the Chandellon, the budget minister that was killed. What you need is the defense establishment. This is Bouchard, who's head of NATO, was head of the bombing campaign in Libya. You need these folks, and he's Canadian, but let's say he was French. You need the French defense forces to be in concert with your intelligence forces, with your idea of planting all these people as operatives within the country. Otherwise, they're going to say, "Hey, this is this is a force to overthrow our government." So they need to be clued in. This is the Valerie Plame role. They need to be clued into what the CIA operations are in the country, and so they work together. So you're going to find that Chandellon here, most of the money didn't go into the F-35 program. That's just a little kickback thing to get the cooperation of these generals in bombing campaigns and also in these gladios. Most of the $240 billion that's missing you're going to find are these gladio operations in every country in Europe, or every country in the NATO alliance. And then you're going to find that there's 6.7 or 6.5 trillion missing from the U.S. defense budget. Most of the money funding the gladios through NATO is coming from the U.S. 6.5 trillion versus 240 billion. Okay, so the U.S., and this has been going on since Allen Dulles and so forth for a long time, has been funding gladios. It started after World War II. The idea being that you would leave behind weapons and caches all around the country. You would have these operatives always, kind of moving in and around, disrupting, attacking political opponents of your chosen generals and your chosen politicians. And then if you ever did have a uprising where you needed to take over the country like Libya, you're ready to go. These things don't happen, over 3 days. They're planned out over a long period of time. I guess that's the basic point. So, Drumheller here with Osprey Global creates this company with Sid Blumenthal and Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation to do that operation in Libya. Basically, it's just activating the Gladio plan for Libya. Okay, and the reason why you see these people doing all these reprehensible things, like getting kids on this island over at Little St. James Island and having all these politicians, intelligence officers, and generals trying to get them to sleep with kids, is because you need 100% cooperation and silence and secrecy for the operation. So that's how I think these folks can justify what they're doing. You're flying, here's somebody mentioned that his helicopter is, Jeff Epstein's helicopter, long-range Bell helicopter, is a State Department helicopter, same tail number before it crashed. So he's running drugs probably into the Zorro ranch in New Mexico, plus also every once in a while you bring in a drug dealer and let him have a fun weekend at the ranch. I'm sure, I'll bet El Chapo has been there many times. But the idea here being that we're really running a big, this is for the good of the country. So, if some of these kids, are sacrificed in the process, well, the greater good is that we, have this control of Europe. And it's not going to just be control of Europe, it's going to be control of every country in, all the 192 countries that Hillary visited. So that is, I'm just putting that forward. I'm not trying to justify this in any way, shape, or form. But the way they get the generals to do this also is they convince the generals that these are kids from their enemies. So if they destroy a person that is an enemy of a general or somehow an enemy of a politician, then they go after the kids as well. And vengeance allows people to get over this hump of child sex. So again, I can't prove a lot of these things. I'm just going from, if you read the Gladio stuff, you'll see that going all the way back to the original, they actually call it Operation Midnight Climax, where they were doing this, in the 50s in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. So let's just take one example, which is the Libya example. Here's Sid Blumenthal. I'm going to kind of say he's the the money man here. This is kind of like the U.S. budget. You've got Grange here, General Grange, and you got Tyler Drumheller again. They're all in the same company, Osprey. Okay. If you look at, again, I go to the history of these things. His wife, Holly Grange, her dad was a general, General Getz, Charlie Getz, I think his name was, and he was also bringing guns back into the U.S. And the cover was, it was for collectors. But basically what the original Gladios started out, after you have a war, you have all this guns from all these other, from all the operations, and you collect them up, you bring them through a port like Wilmington, then you stash them for an American Gladio. So you would put in every state these cutout businesses and so forth, just in case the American people ever rose up for whatever reason. Let's say they enacted martial law and now the American people are uprising. You would have these caches of weapons to go to, as well as you need a force, a group. And I'm not talking about MoveOn.org or any of the Soros stuff. I'm talking about operatives that are much more violent, that are willing to do anything. And you'll see a relationship down below with Hillary and a group called the Fellowship. And that's exactly what that group is. Doug Coe runs the Fellowship. So watch that 4-minute video by NBC News, and you'll see that actually is the makings of an American Gladio. You'll also see that Hillary's ties with Senator Byrd from West Virginia, he's going to have a large group of mercenaries there, and the plan was that she would recreate the KKK type mercenaries that were kind of hiding in the hills of West Virginia in Arkansas. So if you go down, if you look at the Project Veritas videos, they're saying always, we'll go get some mentally deranged person from Arkansas to do this kind of stuff. So that has developed over time to all over the country. But I'm just showing you the same steps that you would take to set up a Libyan Gladio would be the same steps that you would take to set up an American Gladio or Canadian Gladio. Why would I say something like that, and what proof do I have? Well, here it is, 1998. Bill Clinton signed it. It's a disruption campaign. So you basically hire a group of people that are posing as, in all walks of life to then disrupt terrorist groups. But what they're not actually doing is they're not actually going after foreign terrorists. They're going after political enemies of the regimes. So newspaper writers, here's a classic Gladio operation in the 70s with COINTELPRO and Operation Chaos in the U.S. The only difference between this and this is this was discovered by the New York Times. This is Cy Hirsch, I think, broke this story way back when, great reporter. And they haven't broke this story yet in the U.S. Now, Sibel Edmonds has broke this story, so she is an FBI whistleblower, and you can see the notes below. The idea was to combine the FBI and the CIA to include the CIA's counterinsurgency operations. So these are kind of like stealth night operations. So that add that to this program, which was just bugging people during the day and kind of crudely sending them, hey, Martin Luther King, we think he should commit suicide. Kind of not so effective. This is much more effective when you get into the night operations. You can gas areas and do that sort of thing. So here's why what I think the Clinton Foundation's defense is going to be. They're going to say, hey, we are an instrument of the government. We are a CIA cutout or whatever you want to call it. And therefore, the state secrets allows us to sit on these 650,000 records. It allowed us to do the Gmail accounts. It allows us to do payola to FBI and so forth. It allows us to destroy evidence. It allows us to build up our counterterrorism division. So this counterterrorism division that McCabe runs is, as I said, what he did is quid pro quos with Patrick Kennedy. He wanted more agents for Iraq, not for Haiti. Iraq, what I believe, it's a weapons recovery program for the U.S. program, counterterrorism. But when they talk about counterterrorism, they're not talking about Muslim terrorism or something else. They're talking about the Timothy McVeigh. That was the original model. We're going to develop this angry white man meme, and you even hear Bill Clinton saying it. If it wasn't for angry white men, Trump wouldn't have won. So it's this angry white man meme that they keep repeating to then launch this American Gladio type operation. So just another thing on Haiti really quickly. A lot of people have done some great research on USAID. I posted a few things about some of the things that came through the USAID and this company called Dying Corp. And the CIA likes to do fun names like, play on words of the word dying corporation, like we cause death, they do a lot with pirate symbols and all that sort of thing. So you'll see some links down below about how Monica Peterson worked for somebody for Dying Corp. And I don't know the linkages there, but there's some interesting things like Jeffrey Epstein's helicopter also did work for Dying Corp. It was the State Department had registered it for anti-drug operations from Dying Corp. So I don't have anything to say about that. I just wanted to kind of put that research out there. Again, these operations don't happen overnight. They loaded up people up here. The CIA loaded up people over here, or the Clinton Foundation, one of the two, in this northwest corner of Egypt. And then the insurgents came in. It wasn't just protesters here. These people were being trained by General Grange and Delta Force and so forth. They also came in from Tunisia on the other side, which surprised Gaddafi completely. So kudos to General Grange and Petraeus on a good operational plan. So that's it for today. I heard I heard Ford is keeping the jobs in America, some jobs, kind of a token amount really, but it's nice to see that. So that's the news of the day. Thanks.